Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we continue our coverage of the ongoing war taking place between Russia and Ukraine, and we have now entered day 84 of the ongoing conflict, and fighting continues. So, what is happening today? So, first, we're going to start out down in the southeast quadrant of the conflict to the city of Mariupol. And after an estimated 83 days, that city is now finally and fully under the control of Russian forces. It would appear that just under 1,000 personnel remained in the metallurgical fortress, and just under 1,000 of those personnel have surrendered unconditionally to Russian forces. Now, there may be a few leadership elements that have not, as of yet, surrendered, and that could possibly be continuing to negotiate in terms of what is going to happen there. But we can say with certainty now that Russian forces are fully in control of Mariupol. There could be some sort of a prisoner swap at some point, giving those 1,000 individuals back over to Ukrainian forces. Now, obviously, that has not been confirmed. We're going to monitor that and see what actually happens with those personnel, as at least on the Russian side of it, the Russians believe some of those individuals could, in fact, be war criminals. So we'll have to see what happens, and obviously, depending on what occurs, we will obviously keep you updated. In additional news, it would appear that Russian forces have stabilized the lines near the second largest city in Ukraine of Kharkov. We know that Ukrainian forces have pressed very, very close to the Russian border, and due to continued Russian tactical air efforts and heavy amounts of heavy artillery and multiple launch rocket systems, they meaning the Russians, would seem to have things fairly under control now in terms of stymieing that Ukrainian offensive that is taking place. Now, we have seen Ukrainian forces start to pivot in that kind of that southeasterly direction, designed to draw forces away from Izum and make the Russians commit additional forces to the area of operations near Kharkov. Now that the fighting continues, we're not seeing the Ukrainians make the same sort of forward progress we've seen in over the course of the last week or so. But fighting does continue. The Russians continue to use lots of artillery and lots of tactical aircraft, including helicopter gunships, to attack Ukrainian positions. We also know that the Ukrainians are starting to now field the M777 155 millimeter howitzer against Russian forces in the Kharkov area. That is a very good system, and it is, from our understanding, causing the Russians some grief, as it does have a certain amount of extended range over some Russian artillery systems. Not a lot, but the Russians are able to make up for that with multiple launch rocket systems, long-range multiple launch rocket systems, and obviously tactical air efforts. So the idea that the M777 would give the Ukrainians a tactical edge over the battle space against the Russians, that is just something that is not true. Yes, the 155 does have the ability to outreach some Russian systems, but again, there are Russian systems that have the ability to target and outreach the M777 as well. So not a huge game changer, but definitely a very good system that will help the Ukrainians in the long run. The Russians continue to pressure the entire southeastern quadrant of the Donbass front, extending south of Donetsk all the way to Izum. The Russians continue to utilize large amounts of artillery, and we are starting to see more Russian tank and armored infantry units start to maneuver off-road in a manner that may give them a tactical edge at some point. Obviously, it is getting warmer, it is getting much greener, and the ability for the Russians to maneuver off-road and not risk getting stuck in some of these areas obviously is increasing. And we'll have to continue to monitor that, and by June, July, August, the Russians should be able to maneuver in a lot of these areas without any risk of getting stuck in some of these very, very swampy areas, the likes of which we observed in the initial stages of the conflict. Now, with that being said, it does appear that Russian forces are really focused on an extended air campaign and a long-range artillery campaign against Ukrainian forces. This strategy should have probably have been employed at the start of the conflict. It would probably have been in Russia's best interest to launch a 30 to 90 day air and artillery campaign prior to launching the type of offensive that it initially did. And I believe that obviously the Russians can't go back and do a redo. Some of that damage has already been done, and a fairly significant amount of damage has been done to the Russian force construct, especially that core size element that made that dash for Kiev. And probably not a wise decision. Obviously, if it would have worked and the Russians would have been able to capture Kiev, then everybody would be saluting said general who devised such plan. But unfortunately for the Russians, that is not how it worked out. And in war and combat, lots of things do not work out. And in this case, they initiated a very, very high-risk, high-reward operation that did not work out. And unfortunately, that may come back and plague Russia in terms of some of its initial war goals and war aims that it had set out at the start of said war, said operation. Now, at the same time, the Russians have started to revert back and are starting to use that air campaign that probably should have been utilized at the start of the conflict, designed to degrade and destroy Ukrainian forces, lower their morale, destroy stockpiles of weaponry, infrastructure, the tools and equipment that Ukraine needs to continue a protracted conflict. And it would appear right now the Russians are very, very much focused on going after those abilities of the Ukrainian state to continue its war effort. But right now, we'll continue to monitor and watch the situation very, very closely. Not a lot has changed since the prior day. The Russians are continuing to apply pressure towards Severodonetsk, and that fortified city continues to resist Russian attacks, and probably will do so for some time until the Russians are able to encircle or cut off supplies moving into Severodonetsk. It looks like the Russians are probably going to have more success from the direction of Popasnaya down here in the south, as opposed to operations extending from Izum down to Liman. And we'll just have to wait and see if the Russians are able to recover some of their operational tempo that once existed near Izum. that now, quite frankly, has seemed to have been blunted for a number of factors by Ukrainian forces. One, obviously, the Ukrainian counteroffensive near Kharkov, and continued Ukrainian tenacious resistance within the vicinity of Izum and areas around the Donets River, in which the Russians have tried to repeatedly cross. Now, the Russians have established some bridgeheads over this key river, the Savinsky Donets River. However, some bridgeheads have been disrupted and destroyed, making Russian advance or rapid Russian advance much less likely. We understand the Russians are still continuing its attempt to create a bridgehead that would eventually cut off, with the goal of eventually cutting off Severodonetsk from the west. And then obviously, once that is achieved, we will probably then see a move on Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. But the attacks on Sloviansk and Kramatorsk will probably be a much more difficult nut for the Russians to crack than what we've seen in Severodonetsk, and may, quite frankly, be on par with some of the resistance or levels of resistance that we've seen in some of the battles that took place around and inside of Mariupol. In fact, the level of defensive force constructs that are being formed around Kramatorsk and Sloviansk at this point are probably going to exceed the level of defenses that were maintained near Mariupol. So we'll just have to see and how this pans out. Looks like the Russians are attempting a near encirclement of Severodonetsk as opposed to the wide encirclement extending west of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. So first, the Russians are probably going to attempt to pocket Severodonetsk and then focus its energies on Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, and possibly doing a more wider encirclement of those two cities at a later date, if and when they're able to fully encircle Severodonetsk. Now, the problem with this is going to be the same type of issues the Russians ran into near Kiev. The encirclement of Severodonetsk will put those west-facing units facing Ukrainian forces towards the city of Severodonetsk, and then obviously also forces that could counterattack from Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and Bakhmut, this town here. So, very, very fluid situation right now, and we'll just have to see how this pans out. And obviously, we will continue our coverage and continue with our daily reports. Greatly appreciate everyone joining us today. And again, thanks for watching the channel. Much, much appreciated. Have a great day.